And method for planting those is hold your fingers, 2 or 3 fingers around the shoot, and press them down into the ground, and I'd say a couple of inches deep. And they will adjust themselves once they get some roots coming out of the bottom. The roots of the onion family are elastic, and if you plant them too close to the surface, they'll pull themselves down into the soil. If you plant them too deep, they'll push themselves up, so they'll adjust themselves. But beneath the surface, so that birds don't pick out either the old shoot or the new shoot as it grows, they think it's nesting material or worms, and they can pull them out of the ground. Same for onion sets and shallots. And just to illustrate, so that's your main method with garlic. You buy garlic from the shop, break it up like that, plant each clove out 6 inches apart, and each clove by about July next year will produce a bulb. So from each clove you get a bulb. And then just partly this is illustrating the different strategies that plants have to multiply themselves anyway. Here's some larger, well, smaller than that, bulbils. So they formed halfway up the plant. So that'd be a second way for them to form. And here's another one. This is not a flower at the top of the stem. It's a load of smaller little bulbs, again. So they're bulbils, smaller ones. Instead of having a flower, it has extra little bulbs, which would then get broken up and distributed. In 1 year, they grow not into a bulb, but into a single clove bulb. So if you do plant those, you don't get a divided bulb, you get a single large clove growing from each of those. And that's actually snake garlic, so I do want to keep that. I'll keep that separate somewhere there. And that's a bit like this one here, which, yeah, if you've read your Ediculture plant list, you might have wondered what the hell this was. This is the Egyptian tree onion, or walking onion. And what's happened is, last year's shoot was this, which then developed into a flower stalk. But again, instead of having flowers at the top, it had little bulbils. And each year, that's going to grow up and then drop down, and it will plant the little bulbils about 18 inches away from the original plant, so they're not going to compete with each other. And eventually you'd get a spreading clump of these. You've still got your original, and now we've got another little clump which we can either allow to settle on the soil, or that could be planted into a pot to get another plant. So there's walking tree onion, and now we're thinking, so that's bulbs, cloves and bulbils. Onion sets are similar to this walking tree onion. You'd get something about that big, which, like the garlic, you plant that 1 year, 6-8 inches apart, and that, in the case of onion sets, will form an onion the next year. And it depends on the quality of your soil, how you look after them, how big an onion you get, but remembering that smaller onions will store for longer, so maybe that's a better idea. We've done those. Let's move on to thinking about roots. So here's potato, and there's a little shoot that's starting to form on the potato. This was lifted maybe 6 weeks, a couple of months ago now, and it's indicating that it's slightly warm where they've been stored, which is just a room temperature. So we can plant simply the whole tuber. I'll come back to that in a minute with another one. And here's a very beautiful little bit. Who's got clean hands? All right. Can you slice? Ooh, it's been washed. It's like just slice, like thin slice off. Other way around. This way. Knife on the way around. Yeah. And yeah, can you do that for everyone? Pass it around. Nibble a bit and see what it's like. So what's this? It's from South America. It's related to potatoes. It's called oca. It's an oxalis, so you can eat the leaves. They've got the same oxalic acid which you get in rhubarb and sorrel. And this only forms right late in the year when it gets really cold and frosty. So the plant dies down, and it's only at that stage which it secretes a store of energy to carry through for next year, and that will again grow through next year. And similar to the potato, it's got eyes, a bit more obvious on that red one. But yeah, with a little dip, there is a little shoot, and each one of those potentially could form new top growth next year. So potentially I could chop that up into lots of little plants. But just planting one individually will probably be okay. Let's slice that up and pass that around. So that's, I'm calling it a rhizome. I think that's roughly the right name for it. And little bits of that coming around. Something you wouldn't have tasted before. Ochre. Slightly lemony, slightly starchy. Nice when they're cooked up. So most of these we're thinking about what's going on below ground. I'm trying to get a root system established. These are actually illustrating two things. This is a wild strawberry. It has the same growth habit as cultivated strawberry, but different from alpine strawberry. Alpine strawberries clump, and you get more and more shoots in the same place, whereas this one actually spreads by runners. So these haven't taken, but that's a little baby one on the end of a little umbilical cord. And again, like the tree onion, it's going to have seedling, or its young, planted far enough away from the mother plant that they're not going to compete with each other. Let's just see what I've got in here. That'll do. So this is dividing up a clump. You can imagine this happening on a bigger scale. Old leaves finished up. New growth that's going to last the winter, still green. These leaves are just dying off. This has been in a pot for a year. And using that same method as I showed with the poached egg, I can see I've actually got 3, at least, shoots in this clump. And by gripping them quite hard at the top and ripping them down, I've now got that, which is a shoot with a root, which makes a new plant. And I've got the other one there. I could actually do that again, get 3 out of that. So now I've made 3 alpine strawberries where there was 1. Let's just pop that one back into the pot, just to make up the numbers so we've got enough later. And yeah, with the clumps, they actually grow up a little bit each year. So the soil level was lower down last year, and it grows a little bit of essentially stem, which we can then bury when we pot on, and new growth will come higher up from the centre. So that's alpine strawberries. And then what have I got here? Again, oh yeah, this is starting to be a different method. The aerial rooting, these runners go up in the air, hit the soil, and then they'll root. And this is a bit of watercress. There's some in the bowl later on. But you can see along the stem of the watercress, there's little roots forming. And they're forming at each node or the bottom of each leaf coming off. Yeah? So now I can take the top shoot, and if I pop that on and bury the roots, there's roots at the base of each leaf. If I pop that in like that, those roots are going to be able to grow out, and that'll be a healthy new watercress which will last through the winter. But also, each little branching point, at the moment, it's just got the old leaf on. But if I can bury it close to the surface, there'll be a new shoot which will come up from the bottom of that leaf and form a new plant. And it's not illustrating how it's doing that, but yeah. So if this is a precious plant and I want to make lots more plants from it, I've got about a dozen along that little bit of stem. And the key things to take forward from that are this: you get a new shoot from the base of each leaf, which is a common thing in most plants. And also the roots are forming at that point, really where that leaf, if that's pulled off, then there's a chance for that to form a new root. And that's how cuttings form below the ground. And I'll come to that in a bit more detail in a minute.